Hello and welcome everyone for joining us today. Excellencies, distinguished guests, welcome to this session. My name is Claire Davan. I am a World Bank consultant. I work on governance projects in Sub-Saharan Africa. I have a background in social development with youth, also on the continent in the MENA region. As you know, the theme of this edition of MEDays is the question of today's state of affairs. We will be discussing today the emergence of a new world order. For background purposes, since this session will be about the heart of human capital, I wanted to share some facts with you about who and what the education system need to consider. So first, people. Africa has the youngest population in the world, with 70% being under the age of 30. That population is projected to double between now and 2050, 2/3 of which will be absorbed by urban areas. Sub-Saharan Africa remains the region with the most children out of school. That is about 98 million young people. It is also the only region where this number is unfortunately increasing. That makes Africa the world's largest source of untapped talent for economic growth in the world. Planet. Africa is the most vulnerable continent to climate change impacts under all climate scenarios. Despite having contributed the least to global warming and having the lowest emissions, the continent faces exponential collateral damage, posing all kinds of risks, systemic to the economies, infrastructure, water, food systems, public health, agriculture, livelihoods, etc., threatening to undo development gains. So that current African equation, in that current African equation, we have the highest number of least formally trained people, I insist on formally trained, facing the greatest crisis humankind has ever faced. That is this straightforward. We have a little less than an hour to explore this very, very vast topic and very, very complex. So without further ado, I will introduce our speakers today. Our first panelist is His Excellency Mr. Hisham Arafat, former transport minister in Egypt and currently deputy chairman on the board of the Future University in Egypt. As someone who's for many years been leading the development of landmark infrastructure projects in Egypt, the Middle East, North Africa region, His Excellency will share his perspective on how research can inform reforms of the education system that help all young people achieve their full potential in this context. Our second panelist, Mrs. Amina Bouzguenda-Zegal, currently General Director of the International Campus of the Paris Dauphine University, based in Tunis. A mathematician by training, an edtech entrepreneur, a specialist of the digital economy, Mrs. Zegal will help us reflect on today's education versus tomorrow's economy. Our third panelist is Mr. Yosef Abramovitz, CEO of the Energia Global Capital in Israel, one of the world's top environmentalists, currently serving as an ambassador of Israel's Climate Solution Prizes. Mr. Abramovitz will explain the importance of educating youth with the purpose of developing climate change mitigation and adaptation solutions. And last but not least, our fourth panelist, Mr. Tami Gorfi, president of the ESCA École de Management in Morocco, an education expert with decades of experience running high-level international education networks across the MENA region, Europe, the US. Mr. Gorfi brings an unmatched perspective on what strategy should be deployed to encourage the return of African brains on the continent and even prevent their departure. I have now a very simple question to all of our speakers today. It's a yes or no answer. When it comes to understanding the world we live in, the state of the world, do you believe or do you agree that the younger generation is in a historically unique predicament when it comes to, one, realizing that they are the first generation to experience the devastating impact of climate change and loss of biodiversity, and two, that they may be the last generation with the power to turn things around? The floor is yours. A yes or no question.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. I will speak in French. L'Afrique est plurielle, on est à la fois anglophone et francophone. Je pense que je vais être la seule à parler en français. Je continue en français. Alors, je ne suis pas vraiment d'accord. C'est quoi le succès? Churchill disait le succès, c'est d'aller d'échec en échec sans perdre son enthousiasme. Si je regarde l'avenir de l'Afrique, j'ai envie de dire c'est d'aller de crise en crise sans perdre son optimisme. Second.
Magnifique.
I agree globally on the issue about this is a threat and the opportunity at the same time for this generation. But frankly, how can we act as people who know what generation is facing? How do they feel that? How do they manage that? I think it's better to hear from them if we really want to understand what happens. But at the same time, I think this generation, and particularly in Africa, is used to live in so hostile environment. So if you add a little bit more hostility, they will deal with it. And if you add again with this new kind of crisis, another kind of hostility, they will deal with it and they will be able to innovate. And they will be surprising because they are feeling, I'm sure, that they are able to build the future.
A very strong point on resilience and experience. Mr. Arafat.
Yes, hello everybody. I thank you again for the nice invitation. It's my second panel. Our first panel was yesterday, and I think it's interconnected with the issue that we are raising today. To answer your question, I think it's, I heard Mrs. Amina and Professor, while they have answered your question. I think that the Africa's hope resides in the youth. This is, I believe in this. All Africa's hope resides in the youth, who are in large numbers compared to any other continent all over the globe. Leaving them behind, I think, will deter the progress. If we leave our youth, the African youth, we will deter the progress. Any future progress that you are planning for the African continent, you will deter it if you will push aside the youth. Youth empowerment, I think, the youth empowerment, and I think we have discussed this before we came to the stage here. For African continent is not, for me, it's not a luxury, and I think for all of us, it's not a luxury. And they could be, I think they have to be, we have to share them in making, for policymakers, they have to intervene with the youth, especially in Africa, but after you prepare for them good training courses and good education courses and good research program. This is what I'd like to raise. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get back to this in a minute.
So, okay, Salam alaikum, and thank you so much for the invitation to be with you here today. We work in 10 different African countries. You have to remember, before COVID, 11 out of the fastest 20 growing economies in the world was actually in sub-Saharan Africa. It was a very exciting time. There was more economic opportunity, and therefore we saw manifestations of hope and optimism. And then COVID hit, and it's interesting, in each of our countries, when we speak to our partners and to young people, they don't express so much anxiety about COVID. You know, they get their shots or they don't, but it's more about the climate anxiety, but it's expressed differently in Africa. Like, you know, in some of the Western countries, we're worried about rising sea levels, or, you know, more tornadoes or monsoons, or, you know, wildfires. In Africa, they're talking about rain. They're talking about increased desertification. They're talking about not being able to have any agriculture. And so the climate anxiety is actually best addressed through programs, as Honorable Arafat was talking about, the kind of training that can actually, how do you do agriculture when there's less rain? Or how do you have, you can't really rely on hydropower anymore, all those predictions. So therefore, there's other renewable energies that you can bring to the fore. So it's definitely increased anxiety, but it's expressed differently than in the West.
Thank you so much. We'll get back to that climate change anxiety and facing existential threats. A question to you, Mr. Arafat. When we take stock of the Global South education systems, allegedly, low levels of education, standards, and performance have primarily been attributed to poor policy making of governments sometimes. So my question to you is, how can research and think tanks and universities can inform the reforms, public reforms of education?
I think science was created in order to solve problems, social problems, health problems. If we look about, if we have a quick look at the challenges that are facing our continent, we'll find numerous challenges. One of the most important one is the food insecurity, the low productivity of agriculture due to the lack of technology, the harvest, the post-harvest loss due to inadequate strategic reserves. I think it is also one of the main problems that we are facing here in the African continent, poor infrastructures, poor interconnectivity among, and I think we have discussed it yesterday in more details, this issue. We have also some health problems related to AIDS, related to HIV. Also, what is existential threat to the African continent is the climate change. Africa is so vulnerable to the climate change, although it is on the receiving end of the climate change. It's contributing not more than 2% of the total carbon emissions all over the globe. However, they are receiving the least green financing. I think this is, of course, what I call climate injustice. Really, it's climate injustice. So all these challenges that we are facing, we can translate them to a detailed research program for each field. Our universities has to exert a lot of efforts in order to resolve and to find the solutions for that, for all that challenges. But of course, they lack a lot of tools that can bridge the gap between these challenges and the way to solve them. In order to, of course, to bridge this gap, I think there are a lot of institutions like, for example, Springler, Severe. All these tools can provide for the African universities a lot of data and analysis in order for the researchers in order to find their way so swiftly and so easily. But I need for the people of Africa, in order to resolve their own problems, is to focus not only on the publishing documents, or the publishing, not only publishing, but the quality of the publishing. The quality of the publishing is of a prime importance, not to concentrate on the quantity of the publishing. For example, if we say that the ranking of universities all over the world is controlled by everybody, I think, in the university or working in the universities knows quite well. There is something called Shanghai, something called Times Higher Education, something called Quadro Simons or QS, something called Web Matrices. All these international ranking concentrates on the research quality. What is the research quality? What I mean? The research quality, what I mean, is the H index, citations. This is very important. For example, if you have entered to any, try to print out the index subjects in the Web of Science, you will find a lot. If you will print the first paper only, you will form a stack of papers that will reach to the top of the mountains of Kilimanjaro. By the way, it's a fact. But out of this Kilimanjaro stack, 1.5 meters will have citations over 1,000. And out of this 1.5 meters, 1.5 centimeters will have citations over 10,000. So this is what I call the quality of citations. That's why the H index says that you have to concentrate on the paper or the scientific research that have citations over 1,797 citations. So we have to encourage our researchers. We have to encourage our youth, the same subject that you were talking just 10 minutes ago, and we have to empower our young entrepreneurs in order to solve our social and economic problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you're highlighting the knowledge gap of universities, or the way the research papers or centers or institutes on the continent, how they're perceived. And unfortunately, this has an impact on how received their knowledge is. So the quality of the research knowledge gap. From your experience at the Future University in Egypt, how would you make sure that the bridge between research and the government is reduced, as in how to make sure that this research actually informs public reforms?
You mean how you can exploit the research output?
Yes, how can we make it actionable intelligence?
Yes. In order to answer your question, you have to select properly the topic of the research. Do you understand?
Yes.
So, for example, if we are speaking about fighting poverty, if we are speaking about solving food insecurity, so the topic of the research here is much more important than giving the output of the research to the government in order to impose them to the market. So I think first of all we have to have a budget for the research, proper budget, and the proper budget. I think most of our African constitutions stated a percentage that have to be expended on the research as a percentage of the GDP. So it's about 2 to 3%. So we have to impose, to have a political commitment about this issue. Regarding the African governments. So budget is important. Tools, as I have said 5 minutes before, is important. Good supervision is much more important from the professors, and I think joint research program is very important. Joint research. You have to engage and to be contributed with research programs from USA, from Europe, from Australia, from Japan, from China, because this will lead the research program better than to rely mainly on ourselves only. So it will widen the eye of the research. Okay.
Thank you. We'll get back to that topic of also how the private sector can support this field of research and perhaps also joint research program. I would like to turn to Mrs. Zegal on the importance of an education that can build skills to match existing job opportunities. Many educators recognize the importance of designing training programs that match the existing needs of the job market. According to a famous and highly criticized too, but still interesting report by the Institute of the Future in California in 2017, 95% of the job of 2030 would not yet exist. So how can today's education prepare for this great unknown?
Oui, si on veut former pour des métiers qui n'existent pas encore, peut-être qu'il faut suivre le mouvement le plus vite possible, donc être le plus efficace et le plus agile possible pour suivre les changements. Aujourd'hui, selon le World Economic Forum, 90% des entreprises ont commencé la digitalisation de leurs process. L'université reste bien derrière. Et on sait pertinemment qu'il y en a celles qui vont prendre ce tournant, elles continueront à exister. Et celles qui vont rester derrière et elles ne vont pas sauter le pas et puis elles vont tendre à disparaître. Alors, être agile, efficace, il y a plusieurs manières de le faire. On peut d'abord effectivement introduire de la technologie pour une meilleure formation, mais aussi s'associer à des écoles d'un nouveau genre. Aujourd'hui, on parle beaucoup de ces écoles qui utilisent des plateformes, qui se veulent être très efficaces sans avoir ni prof ni classe. On voit beaucoup d'écoles numériques se développer, notamment en Afrique. S'associer à ces écoles, c'est une manière aussi de distribuer un peu les cursus universitaires, d'être agile. Par exemple, j'ai un exemple en tête, c'est celui de Coursera, qui aujourd'hui est peut-être l'école la plus importante au monde, avec 110 millions d'étudiants. Aujourd'hui, s'associer à une société comme Coursera permet à l'université d'avoir de la data et de pouvoir analyser cette data. Analyser cette data permet d'avoir une information plus correcte sur la demande des entreprises en termes d'emploi, en termes de besoins pour les spécialités, les compétences. S'associer à ce genre de plateforme ou nouvelle école permet aussi de renforcer les cursus universitaires avec des certificats professionnels d'une manière plus rapide, plus agile, tout en gardant son cursus ou tout en gardant sa manière classique de former et de se positionner pour le marché de l'emploi. Une récente étude de Deloitte qui date de 2020 a montré que pour les premiers responsables du changement ou du développement du capital humain, ce sont les entreprises. Viennent après les individus. Et les institutions éducationnelles n'ont que la 3e place. Alors une réponse évidente, il faut être de plus en plus le premier partenaire des entreprises pour la formation. Il faut être un provider de compétences, mais aussi les accompagner pour le upskilling et le reskilling de leurs compétences. L'université doit suivre 3 étapes. Éduquer, rééduquer et rééduquer. Éduquer parce qu'en fait, ces entreprises ont de plus en plus besoin, dans un monde numérique, des compétences d'étudiants ou de diplômés hautement qualifiés. Rééduquer parce qu'en fait, on a besoin de s'adapter aux nouvelles compétences demandées par les entreprises. Et rééduquer, c'est parce qu'il faut être dans un continu process d'amélioration, de développement et voilà, et d'accompagnement. En tout cas, pour l'université, il est important aujourd'hui de prendre en compte 4 facteurs. En tout cas, pour moi, ce sont 4 facteurs pour suivre le développement ou le progrès du monde d'aujourd'hui et le monde de demain. Ces 4 facteurs commencent par être conscient de la rapidité de cette révolution numérique. Nous avons connu une révolution industrielle, elle a mis 100 ans pour transformer complètement le marché de l'emploi. La révolution électronique a mis 70 ans. La révolution numérique ne mettra que 15 ans pour transformer le monde du travail. Et encore, ces statistiques datent d'avant la pandémie, d'avant la crise sanitaire. Aujourd'hui, nous pensons que la crise sanitaire a joué le rôle d'accélérateur et demain, c'est déjà aujourd'hui à cause de cette crise-là. Le deuxième point important, c'est se rendre compte que la pandémie a changé les mentalités. Elle a changé les mentalités parce qu'aujourd'hui, si on va au travail, on demande à ce que le lieu de travail soit confortable, qu'il y ait de la bienveillance, qu'il y ait de la bienveillance, qu'il y ait aussi de l'empathie. Et il faut créer de l'empathie. Et cela demande des compétences supplémentaires qui n'étaient pas nécessaires les années précédentes. Des compétences de communication, des communications pour communiquer la culture de l'entreprise et savoir être à l'écoute des employés. En tout cas, la communication aujourd'hui est sortie comme numéro 1, comme human skills pour le monde de demain. Le troisième facteur est un facteur lié au travail à distance qui devient une norme. Aujourd'hui, après la crise pandémique, travailler à distance n'est plus en fait une question, ça devient une norme, ça devient une façon d'être, une façon de travailler. On sait déjà qu'aux États-Unis, aujourd'hui, plus de 50% des travailleurs travaillent à distance. Alors, comment s'organiser ? Il est important aujourd'hui qu'on montre aux étudiants comment collaborer à distance. Les outils de communication et les outils de collaboration à distance deviennent un must-to-have aussi. Et ça, c'est une nouveauté depuis ces récentes années. Et ça prépare aussi les étudiants pour un monde où, effectivement, on ne demande pas que des compétences, mais un savoir-faire pour collaborer, pour communiquer et pour penser. Enfin, le quatrième point, c'est le point qui concerne la robotisation. La robotisation du monde du travail. Et la robotisation fait qu'aujourd'hui, l'humain doit avoir des qualités que la machine ne peut pas remplacer. Et l'université doit être prête à former pour ces compétences-là. On les appelle les 4C. Les 4C, c'est les créativité, communication, collaboration et pensée critique. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup. I'll switch back to English. This is a very interesting bridge with the next question, which will be to Mr. Abramovitz, on the importance of an education that can build skills to address threats that are existing and threats to come, which also, as you highlighted, requires agility, and as Mr. Gorfi said, a lot of resilience. Just a fact, almost 1 African out of 3 last year or the year before suffered from severe food insecurity. Historically, food insecurity was associated with rural areas, but with the pandemic, it showed that a large part of the urban poor also were at risk of acute food insecurity and malnutrition in 2020. So it's 1 person out of 3 on the continent. What's more, due to water shortages, we mentioned that, rain-fed agriculture could contract the agriculture. So we see, in parallel to the importance of the digital economy and skills, we also see the importance of, in the short and medium term, to address this kind of disruption that exists in people's lives. And so my question to you, Mr. Abramovitz, what kind of education can support adaptation, and what kind of transition can it help us move towards renewable energy and sustainable consumption and production practices?
Great, thank you, merci. We're investing in two education programs that we think are path-breaking, and we're piloting them, and we're ready to scale. It's all about local partners throughout sub-Saharan Africa. The first one is with universities, and the second one is with high school students. With universities, now that, thank God there's a ceasefire announced in Ethiopia, we hope to actually actualize the program. What it is that one of our investors, Mark Gelman from Boston, has donated to 13 universities STEM centers on two conditions. The first condition is that women should be at least 50% of the student body that takes part in it, which is very important. And the second is that they consider us building a solar field or a wind farm at the university. So the idea is we have MOUs with 10 universities. We would power them with green energy, but more interesting to the university presidents, they will be living laboratories to train over the course of the 25-year contract almost 200,000 engineers in green jobs with the actual practical experience, and also we get to bring the latest technologies to those STEM centers. And so this is sort of a partnership where we need the government to be able to buy the electricity and the university to give us the land. And then we deploy the technology, and then there's training for 25 years on the actual. So 10 universities in Ethiopia, and we've just offered University of Djibouti as well. I don't know if there's anybody else out there. We need a minimum of 10 megawatts to make it worthwhile. Some of it can go to local community. The second one, which goes, when you talk about the 1 in 3 with the hunger, it's just heartbreaking. In Rwanda, as people know, there was a genocide. And a friend of mine, Anne Heyman, she saw the kids and the effect of the genocide on this whole generation. And after the Holocaust in Israel, we had to take in a lot of orphans, but we didn't have an orphan problem because we built youth villages, sort of replicating the family model, but in a community. So she brought the youth village to Rwanda. It's called Agahozo Shalom. And there's 500 orphans in there for that 14 to 21 is the range. And they come, each governor gets to nominate the 3 hardest cases, social cases, in their own district. So we're dealing with the poorest of the poor, the hungriest of the hungry, the hopeless of the hopeless. And they go through this youth village, and they come out leaders. It's amazing. Like, most of them have gone on to university. Almost 10% go to university abroad, including to the US. They're no longer hungry. They have skills. I think 98% passed the national matriculation exam. It's extraordinary transformation of the hungriest and the weakest to essentially be leaders. And the question is, how do you pay for that? So she does fundraise, and she's since unfortunately passed. But we built her a solar field. The first solar field in sub-Saharan Africa is actually on her land. And there's enough income there that supports a large portion of the budget, particularly the medical costs, of these 500 orphans for 25 years. Now, she only had a certain amount of land, but if there's an NGO, or if someone wants to start a youth village for the most at-risk kids, it could be former child soldiers, it could be these girls that have gone through unbelievable, terrible trauma. If we can build a 100 megawatt solar field, it would pay for the capex of the village and be enough money to throw off to run the village to be a transformative force in those countries and in those communities. So the university one is for STEM centers, and we hope now to get that off the ground. And the other one is, it's an expensive model, but a 50 or 100 megawatt solar field would actually pay for that, and we've proven it, and it works. So we hope to replicate it. If you're in one of these countries, I want to talk to you.
Thank you so much. This second example in particular shows a bit what Mrs. Egal was saying about a nurturing environment where people develop social skills and where they feel empowered and enabled to succeed.
I'll actually just say one more thing about that. They're divided into like 30 houses, and it's kids of perpetrators and victims, you know, and the effects of that. Each one has a house mother, and she's usually a widow from the genocide. And so you have this unbelievable, intense family dynamic of healing. And the first 2 years is sort of healing themselves, and the second 2 years is giving back. It's very moving. I'm happy to bring people to Agahozo Shalom in Rwanda to see it.
It would be amazing to see this. And has there been any research that people, or articles written about it that people can read?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can go to our website, gigawattglobal.com, and click on Rwanda, but Agahozo Shalom Youth Village, and it's the most hopeful place on the planet, and this is after genocide. So let's replicate it.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for giving those two examples. We will now turn to Mr. Gorfi. We want to talk about the brain drain. So going back to students and young people at university getting trainings and important diplomas that can be used in other parts of the world. A 2016 IMF report forecast migration from North Africa, from Africa to Europe, as increasing 3 times in the next few decades. Youth opinion, we talked about what do young people think or want. I actually looked at a new survey from this year, which was reported by BBC and done by a South African NGO. They surveyed more than 4,000 young people in 15 African countries, aged 18 to 24. They found that 52% of them were likely to consider migrating, leaving their country in the next few years. And among the main reasons, they were saying that economic hardship and better education opportunities in the rest of the world were the cause. So my first question to you, Mr. Gorfi, the fact that so many young Africans want to move abroad to find other opportunities, is it alarming? Is it something is it something that is a negative, absolutely, or can it also be a positive?
Thank you so much for this question. If I may, propose to answer the question and come back to some comments about what I heard. But to be polite, I start by answering your question. There is a Moroccan proverb that says, I'm going to tell it in the Moroccan Darija and translate it. حتى قطبك يهرب من دار العرس. You want to pronounce it the Moroccan way. حتى قطبك يهرب من دار العرس. It means you can't find any cat that can fear and get away from a wedding house, in a house where they are wedding. Because when you have a wedding, you have a lot of things to eat, and cats stay there. But the cat leaves when it's threatened. So if youth leaves, if young people want to immigrate, our politicians in Africa have to wonder why, and the question should be, what do we offer in Africa to youth to do things, to be real player in society, to catch opportunities, and to be at the same time real agent of change? I'm not asking that the leaders in Africa to put the red carpet and invite youth. We know how hostile is the environment. I already said that. But the matter is that we have to offer more hope. We need to propose more projects. We have to work on common projects to build. Is it a good thing or not? I think it's not a moral issue. For me, when you give these figures, the last survey were showing as a reference 52% of the youth want to immigrate. This is bad news for Europe. Because the question is bad or good for us. I'm going to come to that. But it's bad news for Europe. Sorry, I'm not very politically correct, but I have to say that. And if Europe doesn't want it to be bad news for them, they have to work with our leaders to cooperate and to co-create wealth on our lands. And you know what does Europe do? The Europe is proposing permits, residency permits for brains. And you have two kinds of speeches. Right, 5 speeches that we don't want any more immigrants and migrants in our countries. This is what the papers and the media highlight as main issues. But the reality, in all European countries, you have at the same time some laws, some rules that offer jobs to brains. And the matter for me, if I take Morocco as an example, and we can say that for all of Africa, every time an IT guy or IT girl, an engineer, is leaving Morocco, I am in my office just imagining that my Minister of Finance in Morocco is giving 250,000 euros to Europe. Every time one of our engineers is living in Africa, in Morocco, we are paying for rich countries. So the issue is when Europeans say, we fear migration, we just have to tell them, okay, guys, you can't choose only the brains and people can create wealth in other countries. We can do business together, come, invest with us, co-invest. We don't ask you to bring your money. The Minister Arafat was saying that we capture only 3% or 2-3% of the green finance, but also, Mr. Minister, we capture only 3% of all the global foreign direct investment for approximately something like 1,400,000,000 people in this continent. Only 3% of the foreign direct investment, which is nothing of nothing. So what happens? We don't have money, people don't want to invest, but they want us to pay for brains, and they just want our brains there. That's why I say it's not a moral thing. If someone from my family wants to immigrate, I mean, I'm happy for her or for him. Because for me as Moroccan, I always think that Moroccan can contribute to my country wherever she is, wherever he is. The matter is not for the individuals. The matter is what is more on how do we act together and what do we do for the public policies and how we do negotiate. But at the same time, don't forget the Moroccan proverb. We have to do what we have to do for infrastructure, for education, for dignity, for respect of genders, for respect of diversity in our societies, to make our societies more open, more stable for all diverse people. We have to work on more responsible and free speeches in Africa. We have to work on more stable systems in the economy and the public policies. Because the matter is, when you have a young couple, even if they have good salaries, they just think about their children. Do we have hospitals? Do we have how much is going to charge for health issues? Do we have good education for my children? And if you have some companies from Europe that propose to go to Europe to have health for free, good education for free, so they leave. This is what I wanted to say about that. So we have to work to do 2 things. First, because we are in a global world, and even if there is a new order and kind of new configuration of that global world, more regional. I think we have to do two things. The first thing is to work for our citizens, to do our best to give the right infrastructures, good education, good health system, fair justice, and more freedom of speech and more responsible freedom of speech. I'm saying responsible because it's a matter of maturity. It takes time. And the second thing is that we have to fight to attract also good brains. We are on a global market, so we can let people go, but we can also offer some positions here. So it's kind of proposition. If you are interested to settle in Morocco, I'll be delighted to help you stay here. We have a wonderful environment, good for investment, good for education, and we can do a lot of things. It's not paradise. It's not paradise at all, but it's a good and nice place. And I think we have to just, in a way, to think that we can also offer something. I just want to end by some comments to what I've heard, if you allow me to do that.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with His Excellency, the Minister Arafat, when he says that research is something crucial in our context. And I really appreciate the fact that with the state, and even with civil society, and even with industries, I'm thinking of businesses, if we work together in research with universities, they have first to pay for. Research is a matter of means, of budget. And that's what he was mentioning. So the first thing they have to understand that if they want to have good research, because we was telling how do we score in research and how we can make it credible and reliable, and this is his presentation and the main thoughts he brought. So we have to do that, but state, civil society, NGOs, and also industry have to pay for that. The second thing, our research has to be very contextualized. It has to be relevant to solve our problems. And for that, I want to share a simple idea. We have people that come from these wonderful and great and powerful US universities, visit our countries, and I have met them in Cairo, visiting Cairo. I've met them in Casablanca, visiting Casablanca, and so in Istanbul, and so on, so on. And there's just a number of students visit a country, and they go back to USA, and they write a case, a business case about what they have seen in our countries. But if you ask them to cross the road in Cairo, they will be dead before crossing the road. The same in Casablanca. How can they write a case on how to deal with the context without knowing the context? We know the context on our fields, and we have to work with the stakeholders to make this research more relevant. That's why it's important to ask them to pay for in the beginning. Second comment is about, because we're talking about education. And education is, in one of your first statement, education is a matter of life. It's not a matter of K-12 or higher education. We have to be educated. You were telling our Tunisian guests that we have to prepare people for jobs that we don't know yet. And it means that we have to be educated all life long. And it means also that we have to work in Africa on education technologies, what you call the EdTech. But the EdTech we need in Africa are not the EdTech we need in California. The EdTech we need in Africa are not the EdTech we need in Paris, Frankfurt, or Madrid. The EdTech we need in Africa have to be related to the context we have in our countries, and I'm talking about Africa, which is so diverse, and should be very humble and said, in Africa's. And I'm sure what I can learn from Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, what I can learn from Nairobi, what I can learn from, Kigali, would be something amazing for me in Morocco to learn from it and to bring some EdTech here. So this matter of EdTech is very important. The second thing about EdTech, in Africa we have to build a lot of new cities. The urbanization is growing. And yesterday in the panel in which you were speaking, Mr. Arafat, I heard that we we need to build one school per day. We cannot build one school per day. If you tell that to any head of state in Africa, say, I don't want to hear that. I don't have the means. So we have to disrupt that. The technology can help. Yeah, I know. Yeah, yes, yeah. If we can do solar field, it's not enough. I mean, it's the challenge is so huge. We need to integrate technology to bring knowledge to people wherever they are and however they want to take it, and so on and so on. Yeah. So that's why we have to disrupt the way we build infrastructures. The main important infrastructure for me now in Africa is having electricity and having internet and then having the road. Because if you don't have electricity and internet, we will not get the knowledge. And I will end by this kind of international platforms and the future of education. I know Coursera, and we use Coursera at ESCA since a number of years. And I agree with you, it's a wonderful platform and very useful. It's one among others. But you know what, for me, next time we're gonna have an Uber ride, they will maybe propose to you have, I don't know, IT course for 10 minutes. And if Uber knows you very well, Uber maybe say, okay, you finished your coding at this step, you need 10 minutes coding on the next level, and so on and so on. Can be in finance, can be in technology, whatever. But the main competitor today for education is named Google. You have everything for free. And the matter is, how can we interact and use all this ocean by mentoring, accompanying, supporting our students from the lower age to the end of life, even for adult learners. And we have to do it the way we have to build new processes as Africans again. Because we can find a lot of things on the global web. The only thing that we cannot find is how to cross the street and being safe in Cairo or Casablanca. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garfi. A round of applause to you through. We have, I think, we have about 15 minutes, I think, for questions from the audience. So I'd like to invite you to go ahead. Do we have microphones in the audience, or do we have to? Okay. Please, sir. A microphone is coming to you.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde. D'abord, il faut remercier effectivement M. Brahim Pacifiri qui nous a permis, dans les 4 coins du monde, de se retrouver. Et c'est un joli forum aujourd'hui. Vous allez me permettre de m'exprimer en français, parce que la plupart des panélistes sont des Anglais. Je voudrais poser 2 questions, ou plutôt factoriser ça en une question, concernant l'immigration. Quand on parle de l'immigration, souvent, on dit les immigrés. Mais moi, je m'accuse et j'accuse mes parents qui nous ont laissé consommer la culture européenne. Nous sommes tous habillés en veste-cravate. Nous ne sommes pas obligés de le faire. C'est parce qu'ils nous ont donné des cinémas, ils nous ont donné des films, et quand on était jeunes, on ne voyait que ça. Alors, on s'identifie à cette même identification. Et les autres qui n'ont pas eu l'avantage de faire des éducations dans l'association, parce qu'on nous a en fait socialisés de cette façon, eux, ils prennent les pirogues pour partir. Donc, ce n'est pas de leur faute. C'est la faute à nous, leurs grands frères, c'est la faute à nos pères qui nous ont laissé consommer, et j'ose le dire, et je vais le dire, et je vais me lever, des produits pourris, très pourris. Nous qui sommes socialisés, francisés, anglicisés, comme vous voulez, nous sommes tous en veste-cravate, on n'est pas obligés. Partez en Kenya, ils sont toujours en pagne. Alors, les gens, les Africains qui n'ont pas eu la chance d'avoir cette éducation, ils prennent les pirogues Parce qu'ils ont vu les films au moment que nous les avons vus. Alors maintenant, ce n'est pas de leur faute. Ça, c'est la première question. On faudrait bien situer la responsabilité de l'immigration. Ce n'est pas la faute aux immigrés. Il faut les laisser tranquilles parce qu'ils n'ont pas le choix. Donc la deuxième question, comme j'ai pris un peu de temps, je factorise. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. On a une deuxième question ici.
My question have to do with the pandemic. We had to close down schools in a very short period of time. And my question is, what have we learned? And are we going to resume education as if the COVID-19 never happened? Because that's what I'm seeing a lot of schools just doing as if the pandemic never happened. So just going back to their old habits, not take full use of technology. And I'm talking about K-12 here, not the university.
Is your question addressed to one of the speakers in particular?
Tammy or
Mr. Gorky,
anyone.
please. Oh, sorry, Mr. Arafat first.
I will ask your question, and I will leave for you to answer the long question. Yeah. Regarding the pandemic, yes, it's. I think the pandemic have left an unmistakable impression that will last for decades. To close the lockdown have created a lot of solutions in order to not to deprive our students and our nation from getting learning. Yeah. So this created a lot of platforms, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. They have some universities have adopted the virtual reality, adopted the artificial intelligence as an advanced method of learning. But of course, after the pandemic have been slowed down, and we have returned back to schools and universities, to ask me as a professor, not as a minister, ex-minister, I think it's better to have eye contact with direct eye contact with your student. I'm always looking at my students in their eyes, to be sure that they are understanding quite well the topic. This is a privilege, by the way. And we have been deprived from that privilege during the lockdown. But however, now, all the platforms that you are stated are available. And this is, we always say, ربنا بيجيب المشكلة and بيجيب لنا الحل. يعني ربنا سبحانه وتعالى بيجيب المشكلة وبيجيب لنا الحل. So as our mighty God provides us with the catastrophe, it provides us with the solution also. He provides us with the solution. So in this, for me, eye to eye, or the face to face, or whatever you name it, is more crucial than also the online or the other platforms. Okay. Regarding the continuity, yes, it will. I'm sure that it will be continuous, because there are a lot of, by the way, research program, I know quite well this, especially directed in the virtual reality and the artificial intelligence, in order to provide this eye contact through the technology. Do you understand me? And I think we will reach maybe within 3 to 4 years, but this doesn't mean that I am looking forward to another pandemic. Inshallah, ما يكونش فيه يعني. Inshallah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, yeah, the feeling of being in person for learning purposes is always something to be better. Would you like to say something? Yes.
Monsieur, il est beau votre costume.
Il vous va bien.
Et il vous va très bien. Ils ont eu raison, vos parents. Je pense que c'est une chance d'être ouvert à d'autres cultures. Et c'est ça la richesse de l'Afrique, quelque part, c'est accepter une certaine diversité tout en étant conscient de son identité. Après, c'est à nous, pays africains, de favoriser ou de développer ou de mettre en avant une mobilité interafricaine Et j'invite mes amis, Hichem et Temi, pour organiser ou mettre en place des partenariats entre nos universités. Voilà ce qui pourrait nous faire nous donner un avantage supplémentaire par rapport à ce que nos parents nous ont appris.
I just want to say, I don't know what planet you're living on. Like, most of the schools and the places where we're working don't even have electricity, let alone internet. Like, it's sort of, yes, where you can do the internet and the artificial intelligence and all that stuff, but you know, I know a developer that I hope, solar developer in Sierra Leone, and his deal is that in addition to doing big solar fields, he'll have to electrify 5,000 schools, meaning basically all the schools in Sierra Leone that don't have electricity. Like that's how most people are living on the continent, and so we have to be relevant in those areas. And this is really just a plea, if I may, for good governance. You pointed out that so little climate funding and so little direct foreign investment are going into sub-Saharan Africa, and you can blame the West, you can blame the rich countries, but you know what? It's so hard to have certainty. It's so hard to avoid the bad guys, and you know what I'm talking about. And so we need the forces of light in each country to come together and to be able to protect these endeavors so that the investments can come in, whether they're social investments or they're financial investments, or they're financial investments with a social benefit. But that's a big reason. If investors don't have some degree of protection and certainty, then they won't go into the places where there's no electricity and there's no internet. So it has to, I like your term co-create. The two programs I described were co-created. And so we need the partnership to be able to get past this if we're going to improve education in sub-Saharan Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abramovitz. Unfortunately, this will have to be our conclusion.
Oh, no, it's a negative. Don't end on a negative. Let him finish.
Please go ahead.
I have to answer the question from Samir, 30 seconds. That's why I was saying, Joseph, electricity, then internet, okay? You're right, Samir, we are not going to go back as if nothing happened. We are in a new world. That's why I love the way the American, the English language calls that new normal. So we're not coming back to only normal. It's a new normal. So it's a new reference, and we have to take it into account. For me, education has to rethink the way the pedagogy is deployed. So we have to work on what about the pedagogy in the classroom? What about the pedagogy in the peer-to-peer learner between the two students? For the K-12 I'm talking about. We have to work on how we can bring the faculty members, the teachers, to adapt and readapt. And this will be the great resistance. Coming back to an old comfort is the best for them. But we have to accompany them, we have to help them. And we have to help them make successes. So I think we have to build in a new way to teach, a new way to work in the pedagogy in school. And for that, we need to have what I call in my institution, if it's a higher education institution, a learning lab. We settled the learning lab at the SK, we call that the SK Learning Lab, and the learning lab is not for students. The learning lab is for everybody, and this is the lab in which it's permitted to fail, because it's a lab. And we just experienced a lot of pedagogical tools. This works, doesn't work, and if it works, if the stakeholders, and particularly students, are happy with that, we can disseminate it. So we need all together to work, but please, in context. In context. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gorfi. Unfortunately, this will have to be the conclusion of this session. Very rich discussion. I want you to, a round of applause for our speakers today for a very rich conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Shukran.